Hey, true crime fanatics, this is Claire.
And I'm Andy.
You're tuned in to the Homicide Hobbies podcast, which is a podcast for people who love to hear about the horrendous crimes that people commit. Enjoy.
So today, we is going to discuss Henry Lee Lucas. Now, I'm not going to try to pretend when I began researching Henry, I didn't realize what a mess of a case this would become. So for some trigger warnings, because I like my trigger warnings, unlike Miss Claire over there. She likes to just surprise us with them gory details and bestiality and all that fun stuff.
Sounds like you like it.
Now, for you, Claire, this case is just up your alley. So
I don't know what that means.
I got lots of them trigger warnings, and I'm sure I'm going to miss some of them, so I apologize. Just know this is a pretty gross case. We've got child abuse, rape, a ton of murders, incest, arson, burglary, kidnapping, cannibalism, necrophilia, and we'll briefly discuss zoosadism, which is the killing of animals for pleasure, and Claire's favorite, bestiality.
Were you just trying to find a case that checked all the boxes?
Sure was. No, I wasn't. But when I kept reading, I was like, gosh, this guy is a freak.
Where and when are we?
I ain't told you yet. So
I know. That's what I was asking.
As per my usual, this case takes place my favorite time period, the 70s. And it's it's over the course of the 60s through the 80s, but we're
practically the 70s.
Yeah. And we're in the US all over. Little something to look forward to, Claire. I hope you're ready to read some quotes for me today. So get your reading eyeballs on.
How are those different than my regular eyeballs?
I don't know. But this guy doesn't ever shut up. He's known in the media as the confession killer. So this is a two-part case, but we're going to do part 1 today, obviously, and part 2 will release on New Year's Day.
Yippee!
You're an idiot. Now, let's get started. So some of the details about Henry's childhood and adolescence, it's a bit fuzzy because there's several different versions of what happened. So I'm going to give you whatever I found to be the most consistent version, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So we're going to start with Henry's childhood. Henry Lee Lucas was born an innocent child on August 23rd, 1936.
In Indiana?
In a one-room shack located in Blacksburg, Virginia. Realistically, it was a rundown shed with dirt floors. There was no power, and there was barely a roof over the family's head. Now, Henry was one of 9 children. In birth order...
In a shack?
In a shack. In birth order, Henry was number 8 of 9. The level of abuse that Henry suffers as a child, I 100% believe molds him into the monster he ends up becoming. Henry's father, Anderson Lucas, worked for the railroad. He eventually would become unemployed, and he was nicknamed Anderson No Legs Lucas after he lost both his legs in a workplace accident.
That is a fucked up nickname to give somebody who loses their legs, regardless of how they lost them, but particularly so when it was a tragedy.
Yeah, it was at work. I'm guessing that they were probably shifting the trains from one track to the other. He got run over, lost both his legs. Like, that's super fucked up to nickname him Anderson No Legs. Like,
yeah.
So
he didn't have friends at work.
Apparently not. Or he had friends that thought that when he was in dire stress that it would be better to make jokes.
I don't know how I'd feel if I lost my legs at work and then next time I was like just passing through like, oh, there's no legs, Claire.
I'd laugh for you.
I wasn't laughing in that story, just so we're clear.
No, but I'm sure his buddies were. So I'm just saying.
Back to No Legs Anderson.
He eventually tried making money by selling pencils and stolen whiskey.
What?
Yep. So he, obviously with no legs, he loses his job at the railroad.
I got that. But is there a market for pencils and whiskey?
I'm guessing because it's the 30s and 40s that
Prohibition?
the alcohol, pencils, things like that are, I guess. I don't know. That's
It's
what he's
just
trying to do.
would you like
Now,
a shot of whiskey or a pencil?
or maybe he gives them the shots of whiskey and then convinces them once they're drunk to buy his pencils. I don't know. Anyway, Henry's mother, her name's Viola Dyson Wall Lucas. Now, she is a monster. Viola was a drug addicted, alcoholic, sadistic prostitute who was 41 years old when Henry was born. She would force her children and her husband to watch her engage in sexual acts with clients. If the kids tried to look away, they would be beaten.
I don't feel like the same clients would be coming back. Hold on just a second. I need to go beat my child who doesn't want to watch us have sex. I'll be right back.
Uh,
I'm just going to the other side of the shack. Don't mind me.
she would also force her children to participate in some of her sexual escapades.
Um, so I feel like she's consuming the whiskey. I don't feel like there's any to sell. Where's Legless Anderson?
She was also beating her husband regularly.
The fuck?
Yeah, she's a monster,
Why didn't anybody kill her?
right? So Viola enjoyed beating her children, and sex, pain, and pleasure were all one and the same for Henry. Viola would also dress Henry. Not sure if she did the same with her other sons or just picked on Henry, but she would make him cross dress and send him to school dressed as a girl.
Or she's
She
too drunk and high. Maybe she got confused. There are 9 of them. So she's just like, your name is not Henry. You're Henrietta. Don't you remember? Now get yourself on to school.
she would curl his hair into little ringlets and put him in dresses. Needless to say, kids can be awful, and he was relentlessly bullied at school. But aside from being a monster and just enjoying tormenting her young son, her purpose behind cross dressing him was so that Viola could pimp her son out to both men and women.
They didn't think he'd notice his weenie.
I don't think some of them cared.
Then what's.
Yeah, she's disgusting. Eventually, a teacher at Henry's school would cut his hair and put him in regular clothing. Viola lost her shit on that teacher and went to school and caused a huge scene. And the teacher, bless her, did not back down. At some point, Viola received a court order to stop cross dressing her son. Yeah.
You can still pimp him out, but he better be a little boy when you do it.
So, Viola, living with her handicapped, alcoholic husband and 9 children, apparently felt there wasn't enough people in the tight quarters. So, she moved a man in that she had her children refer to as Uncle Bernie.
Was he Uncle Bernie because of some STDs?
He's Uncle Bernie because he's Viola's boyfriend slash pimp. And Viola treated her children like servants and expected them to wait on her and Bernie. And
I wasn't sure if it was Uncle Bernie because there was some burn-in.
It's quite possible. Viola also allowed Bernie and her clients to beat both her children and her husband Anderson.
What the fuck?
Right? Henry eventually claims that his mother also got very angry with him for something, so she murdered his pet donkey out of spite.
What?
Yeah.
It's because she was mad his hair wasn't growing fast enough.
Perhaps. The food Henry and his siblings and his father would consume was usually stolen from the neighbors or stolen from stores.
Why didn't they eat the donkey?
I'm sure they probably did. The older Henry got, the more he was beaten and the harder he was forced to work. And I'm not sure if his work was chores or being pimped out by Viola and Bernie, but nonetheless, his beatings grew more frequent and more violent.
How old is he at this point?
I was about to go there, but we all know how I feel about people that abuse children. So I feel for this kid. All of them, realistically.
Yeah, because she's pimping them all out, right?
Yeah. And beating them and letting other people beat them. Like I really, really feel sorry for all these kids. And I did read an article that said throughout their childhood, these kids would get taken away from her, but I don't Henry grew up with her. So I don't know if some of the kids that end up getting taken away and others remain there or what her deal is, but she's a piece of shit. Now, at one point, she beat her young son. And when I say young, Claire, he was 7. She beat him so badly with a 2x4, she split his head open and his skull was exposed.
What?
Henry was in a coma, and Uncle Pimp Bernie, he convinced Violent Viola to take the comatose boy to the doctor. He remained in a coma for 3 days.
My God. What did she
Yeah,
hit him with?
a 2x4. She beat him so bad that she split his skull or his head open. That's bad. And she told the hospital staff that Henry fell from a ladder. Eventually, the 7-year-old terrified little boy woke up terrified of his mother, and he confirmed her story that he fell off a ladder. Henry continued to be beaten at home and tormented at school. His teacher, who stood up to Viola, would later say that Henry was always filthy, malnourished, and described him as a loner, which doesn't seem too far fetched that he'd be a loner if he's getting bullied.
Yeah.
Eventually, Henry developed seizures and started hearing voices.
It's all the head injuries.
Around 8 years old, Henry and one of his older brothers got into a physical altercation. The brother pulled a knife on Henry and ended up injuring Henry's eye, damaging his vision. Viola, being the award winning mother that she's been, neglected Henry's eye injury. And while at school, someone whacked Henry in the back of the head with a wooden ruler. His vision that was temporarily gone became permanent. So now he's blind in one eye. Henry ended up having such a bad infection in his eyeball that he had to have it removed and replaced with a glass eye. He was 8.
Oh my God.
Anderson, Henry's father, he would give Henry moonshine on a regular basis that Henry became a full-blown alcoholic by age 10. That's a very,
I
yeah.
don't even know what to say to that.
Aside from the one teacher, the only other person who showed Henry compassion was Anderson. And when Henry was 13, Anderson got drunk, which wasn't unusual. But now, okay, so this one in particular, I found several different versions of how the next event plays out. So I'm going to give you the 3 main ones that I found, and you guys can decide whatever you want. So option 1 was Viola tossed the legless man out of the house into the cold December night. Anderson developed pneumonia and died shortly after. Option 2, Viola tossed her drunk handicapped husband into the snow where he died in the below freezing temperatures overnight. Or option 3 was that he committed suicide by choosing to sleep out in the snow and freeze to death. But no matter how it unfolded, Anderson Lucas died. So the only person that helped this little boy, and quite frankly, I think he was getting him drunk so that the beatings and the sexual abuse wasn't as traumatic, I think. Does that make sense? Yeah. Now, the details vary also on this one, but some articles said it was an older brother. Others articles say it's Uncle Bernie, but it's someone older than Henry introduces him to bestiality. Whoever it was took it upon themselves to teach this impressionable young boy on how to physically and sexually abuse animals.
Do I want to know what kind?
So Henry and whichever male role model it was would take turns sexually abusing and beating the animals into submission. Henry would then escalate on his own and would kill the animals after committing bestiality. And sometimes he would even murder the animals before having sex with them.
Oh, what the fuck, Andrea?
Henry truly hated his life, and the only sliver of happiness that he says he ever had was his dad. And now that his dad is dead, he was desperate to get away from his abusive mother. So Henry would begin running away from home.
He's how old?
13. The now bitter and angry young teenager would run away and become obsessed with sex. He would capture any and all small animals.
Just now? He was already fucking dead ones.
So this is the same time period. So he would capture any small animals that he could and perform sex acts on them before and after killing the animals, which is called the zoo sadism. Hey, I have a question.
What?
And I was not going to Google this one because it's not going on my search history.
I'm
But
not going to do it.
is it necrophilia if it's a dead animal, or is it only necrophilia if it's a dead human?
I feel like it's necrophilia when it's just the person. Because did you know? I'm having a brain fart of what the word is, but it's only an autopsy. Oh yeah. Okay, I remember. It's only an autopsy when it's on a human. Otherwise, it's a necropsy when it's on an animal.
Huh, that's interesting.
So I would imagine there's probably a different word when you're fucking a dead person or you're fucking an animal. But I
wasn't
wouldn't
going to
know.
Google it. That's not going. I feel like there's enough scarring stuff in my search history
How about let's
that,
just call it disgusting?
yeah. Well, Henry begins stealing, and I believe it originated from necessity. Because also, the only way he ate when his dad was alive was what they stole. I don't know why being off on his own would be any different because he was never taught another way.
Yeah.
So it's believed that in 1952, Henry was around 15. He wanted to finally have sex with a human being that was consensual.
Finally. Well,
Yeah.
at least he's going for consent.
No, consent on his end.
Well, you
So
said it would be consensual. That implies both parties. Obviously, if he's partaking in it.
he was seeking out this sexual escapade, okay? So he makes sexual advances towards a girl waiting at a bus stop. She told him to buzz off and leave her alone. Henry was upset and he claimed that he kidnapped this 17-year-old girl named Laura Burnsley. He said that he beat her unconscious and began to rape her. But when Laura came to during the rape, she began to fight him off. So he started strangling her until she laid still.
Just like he did with the animals.
Uh-huh. But it was at this point for Henry when he decided that a dead woman can't say no. So he finished his sexual assault on Laura's corpse. He said he had no intentions originally of killing her, and he felt bad for a long time afterwards, but he still killed her and still finished
What he
having sex
started.
with her body. Yeah.
Well, otherwise it would have been a waste.
I need to point out there is no proof of his version of events, but this girl did go missing. She was found strangled. She was raped. Henry says that it was him. He was able to give details, but there's no way of proving it because of the time period. When he later admits to this, he is a lot older.
He's claiming something, he can't prove it.
Yeah, because it's literally like 40 years later or 30 years later. My math ain't so good. My latte's done worn off. It was around this point in time that Henry was wandering the streets of Virginia. He was arrested one evening for breaking and entering and was found guilty and placed in the Beaumont Training School for Boys. Henry's school records would reflect his temperament would be calm and rational one moment, and then suddenly, for no apparent reason, he would become violent and uncontrollable. While at the school for boys, he made a friend, and this friend, the officials at the facility would say that the boys' relationship was of a sexual nature. Henry remained at the Beaumont School for 1 year. And now I could be wrong on this, but I believe this is around the time he turned 18, which is why he was allowed to finally leave the school. Also, later in life, Henry would brag at around 17, 18 years old. That's when he raped his 12-year-old niece.
Okay.
Henry picked up a few skills working briefly as a farmhand. His new job was cut short because he was arrested on June 10th, 1954, a second time for breaking and entering. It was at this point, because Henry's now 18, he's charged as the adult that he legally is. He was convicted of over a dozen breaking and enterings or burglary charges and was sentenced to 4 years in Virginia State Penitentiary in Richmond, Virginia. That's a lot of breaking and enterings, by the way. Over a dozen.
And he's still 18, right?
Yes. I think what it was there was like a string of burglaries in a specific area or breaking and enterings, and they were able to finally catch him red-handed, and then they were like, "Are you the little shit that's been doing this?" And he was like, "Yeah, it was me." So he was sentenced to 4 years.
What
Then
was stolen when he was breaking and entering? Did they say, or it was
they
just
didn't say. It's just stuff. While in prison, Henry learned a few more basic skills and got a job where he worked with a crew cleaning up the sides of the highways. However, during one of Henry's daily outings cleaning up the highway in 1957, he managed to steal a car and escape. He avoided being captured for 2 whole months. During this brief freedom, he met a woman named Stella.
get her groove back?
Well, I don't know what movie it is, but where they're like, Stella! I don't know. Anyway. Eventually, Henry is arrested or captured in Ohio for transporting stolen goods across state lines. Henry escaped twice from the prison. Twice. 2 times. The second time is only for 2 days,
I
though.
appreciate you explaining what 2 times means.
It's 2 times. Dos. Uno, dos. 1, 2. He's escaped both times, right? He was still released on time from prison on September 2nd, 1959.
I don't get that.
I don't either. He's not on good behavior. So he was sentenced to 4 years and then escaped. Well, I guess it's not really on time because he was arrested in 1954 and was released in 1959. So I guess he served his full 4 years. But you'd think they would have tacked on more time for him breaking out or escaping. But so he was released September 2nd, 1959. A little bit later, the same year, not much later because it's freaking September. It's only so many months left of the year. Henry went to live with one of his sisters. Her name was Opal. And he kept in touch with the woman that he met while he was out and about, Stella. After dating briefly, he popped the question, and Stella agreed to marry Henry, which I call into question her.
Yeah. Must not have been a lot of choices for her.
The happy couple announced their engagement, and now Viola, his wonderful mommy dearest, the original mommy dearest, came to visit Henry. And
who the hell was he still talking to her?
I don't know. But she came to visit Henry at Opal's house, and she disapproved of Henry's fiancée, Stella.
She doesn't pimp him out, so.
Right? I don't know much about Stella other than she met an escaped convict and fell in love and kept in contact.
Hey, is he still an alcoholic? Or was that only when he was a child?
You know what? It doesn't say much about him being an alcoholic as an adult, but I think he does have a serious drinking problem. Probably not as severe as it was as a kid, mainly because I don't think it was as accessible to him.
Well, I wasn't sure since he started that with his dad, if maybe when his dad passed, he couldn't drink it because it reminded him of his person.
So I do know that he drinks still, but I don't know if he's the sloppy drunk that he was as a child.
Yeah.
Viola tries to convince Henry to break up with Stella and come back home to her shed and take care of her.
She's got too many clients. Not enough, but his hair's looking real pretty these days.
Viola's now elderly. She's 74 years old, but Henry...
Jesus. She's still working?
I don't know. Henry wants nothing to do with this wench. And quite frankly, I don't feel like he owes her anything other than a swift kick in the...
She took plenty from him.
Yeah. So Viola insisted that she needed someone to come live with her and care for her in her old age. And
so Henry... much bad luck.
Yeah, Henry refused. And after a very short but violent argument, Stella witnessed all of this. She was like, I don't want to be a part of a family like this. And she broke off their engagement.
Yeah, I don't blame.
Well, Henry was pissed. And Henry has the right, in my opinion, to be angry with his mother, because if she wasn't being such a giant bitch, then none of this would have escalated.
If
But
she didn't pimp him out when he's a child, a lot of things probably wouldn't have happened.
true. And I feel like other than the stealing, which I realize stealing is still bad, but I don't, well, I guess he did murder that one chick. At least he claims he murdered her.
What?
The the girl at the bus stop.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot about her for a brief second, but I feel like
Weirdly, I did too, and I don't even know how.
there's a lot of information to take in with this guy. So, but I feel like he's trying to keep his life on track-ish, minus the escapes from prison, murdering, and breaking and entering.
Yeah, so I was giving you a face there.
Like,
He's trying real hard. I'm like,
well, I don't think he's
except for
trying real
that chick
hard.
that he murdered, but he's on the right track.
I feel like you can okay, I'm not
Mhm.
crazy, I promise, but
Mhm.
I feel like you can see that he really wants a, quote, "normal life," but he just doesn't know
Mhm.
how to get there, if that makes sense. It's just he knows this way, and this way is easier. This angry, pissed off Henry, he leaves the tavern where they all were when this bickering fight breaks out and Stella breaks up with him, and he heads back to his sister Opal's apartment. But he was followed by his verbally abusive mother. She continued to verbally attack him back at the apartment, and at one point, he claims that she grabbed a broomstick and broke it over Henry's head.
That is not where I thought the broomstick was about to head.
Well, Henry returned the blow to the head. So after Viola's done whacked him in the head with the broomstick,
All I remember was slapping her alongside the neck. But after I did that, I saw her fall and decided to grab her. But she fell to the floor, and when I went back to pick her up, I realized she was dead. Then I noticed that I had my knife in my hand and she had been cut.
so then Henry proceeds to rape what he believes is his mother's corpse.
Um,
I'll let you process that one for a moment.
I mm,
He just stabbed her in the neck,
and then
rapes what he thinks
decided,
is her corpse.
was it the neck hole?
No, I think that's only your case that you found where they like to poke holes.
It feels like with all the things that have occurred in this case, it was a possibility.
It's not. He thought he had just killed his mother. Henry then stole a car and headed to Virginia after shutting out the lights in Opal's apartment. I mean, I guess at least he thought to save his sister on electricity.
Right.
Viola, the stubborn bitch that she was, she did not die. Opal returned to her apartment to find Henry gone and their mother bleeding profusely. Viola lived for 48 hours before she suffered a massive heart attack in the hospital and died. Henry was arrested in Ohio and brought to Michigan and was charged with second-degree murder. After his arrest, Henry swore the attack was in self-defense, but the courts weren't having that excuse. I guess it's not self-defense if you turn around and have sex with the body.
Yeah, it's a little less convincing, turns out.
Henry decided to plead guilty and was sentenced to 20 to 40 years to be served in the state prison of southern Michigan. Henry claimed that during his stay in the prison, he was constantly hearing voices in his head, one of which was his mother's. He claimed his mother's voice was taunting him and telling him to commit suicide as punishment for killing her.
Ew.
Henry attempted suicide several times by slashing his wrists with a razor, and he also tried slicing his stomach with a razor, but each time the guards would save him.
What? Uh, the stomach?
He tried to gut himself.
That's both disgusting and not a wise strategy.
He's just trying to give himself a tummy tuck. They thought he was trying to kill himself.
You're an idiot.
Henry was transferred to the Iona State Mental Hospital, where he would endure 4.5 years of intense shock therapy and drug therapy. The treatment only made Henry's temperament more hostile, more angry, and more violent. And he even told the doctors that if he were released, he promised he would kill again. In 1966, Henry was sent back to the previous prison where he said he was bent on revenge. I'm not sure who he wanted revenge on, whether it was his mom, because she's already dead, maybe the prison guards who kept saving him, or the doctors who kept electrocuting him. But He wanted his revenge.
Why does it have to be one revenge?
Who does he have to get revenge on? I feel like
He already did on his mom.
yeah, doctors, they're just stupid and trying to fix him. But I feel like if somebody's electrocuting me, I'm not going to be very nice to them either.
Well, they were trying to fix him.
Henry would later say,
"When they put me out on parole, I said I'm not ready to go. I told them all, the warden, the psychologist, everyone. I was going to kill again."
the prison did a fabulous job of teaching Henry how to become a more productive criminal.
A lot of them learn how
Yeah.
to be. It turns out they learn tricks and trades of each other.
They sure do. Because Henry was convinced that he knew exactly how not to get caught and how to commit the perfect crimes, including murder.
I don't feel like he does.
Due to an overpopulation in the prison, Henry was released in June of 1970. We welcome our 70s now.
You were way too excited for that.
I sure was. He apparently told the guards that he would leave them a present on their doorstep as he left.
Is it a turd?
Henry later claimed to have murdered 2 women on the same day that he was released from prison and left one of the bodies within the sight of the prison walls.
That'll teach him.
But there's no evidence that's been uncovered to prove that this confession is true.
Did they find a body?
I don't know.
Because I was going to say that's probably the first indicator that a crime occurred.
So, spoiler alert, when I said in the beginning that this case is a mess of a case, he confesses to over 200 murders. So,
didn't count very good.
It's a lot. About 1 year later, so 1971, Henry ended up back in prison for attempted kidnapping and molesting of 2 girls near a bus stop.
What's with him and the bus stops?
I don't know. Henry was also found to be in violation of his parole because he was in possession of a handgun.
That's the bigger issue.
Right? I have that written in all caps. Only reason was in violation. That's why he went back to prison, was for having possession of a handgun. How about the girls?
Maybe they were prostitutes.
They were not. In 1975, after convincing prison officials that this time he was going to find a place to settle down and get a job, and seeing that we're smack dab in the mid-70s at this point, they foolishly believe Henry. Yep, they sure do.
Because if history has taught us anything, it's that they believe they can rehabilitate in record times.
They sure can. Those repeat offenders, all you gotta do is give them a little zap zap here and a zap zap there. Here a zap, there a zap, everywhere a zap zap. Shut up, Claire.
Oh, I was.
Little did the officials know. Settling down was the farthest thing from what Henry actually intended to do.
You don't say.
He served his 4 years before he was released again on parole. He would become a drifter, moving all around the U.S., leaving trauma and devastation along the way. Henry traveled to Maryland, where he visited one of his sisters and her daughter, and he stayed with them for 3 days. After that brief visit, he moved in with his niece and her husband, which I really hope it's not the niece that he claimed to have raped.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But realistically, he's gotten 8 siblings who all have families and children, so who knows which child he managed to get his little clutches.
Also wasn't where I thought you were going with that.
It was through the niece that he's living with that Henry would meet a young woman named Betty Crawford. Henry and Betty became fast friends and even more quickly became more than friends. Now, Betty, she had 3 daughters that she brought to this new relationship. Betty and Henry married in 1975, the same year he was released for his attempted kidnapping. And this new family of 5 moved all around the U.S., living off of Betty's Social Security checks. They would eventually in and out of different trailer parks. And Henry would have a lot of trouble finding and keeping a job. Eventually, Henry, Betty, and her 3 daughters would move back to Maryland. One day, Betty was furious with Henry and accused him of molesting her daughters.
He probably did.
Which Henry denied the accusations. Here's your favorite part, Claire. Any guesses on what he does?
He rapes the daughter.
Nope. He packs his crap and moves out. He continued to drift around the country with nowhere to call home until 1977. So Betty and Henry were married and divorced within 2 years.
She got off lucky then.
Hope as long as he didn't actually molest the daughters, because at that point I feel like
They're not dead though.
Our version of luck is a little different.
Would you rather be dead or raped?
I'd rather be neither.
Did that sound like it was an option?
It became an option.
It did not.
Sure did. Sure done diddly did.
This isn't one of those write-in tests. It's A or B.
I chose C. So Henry traveled to California, Florida, and Michigan. He would mainly stay with family for the most part while he floated around the country, and he would work different odd jobs at family-owned businesses to earn some spending cash. Eventually, the nomad life wore on Henry, and he moved back in with one of his sisters and her husband, and he got a job working with his brother-in-law at a wrecking yard. At some point, the sister that he's living with accused Henry of molesting her granddaughter.
How old is he at this point?
He was born in 1936. It's 1977, so 41. So, and since he's the youngest of number 8 of 9 kids, then I'm guessing he's got a sister that's in her 50s or 60s, and she's now accusing him of molesting her granddaughter. And again, Henry denied the accusation, angry or
it's
guilty.
Worked for him thus far.
I don't know if he's angry about the accusation or feeling guilty, but that night he stole the car from his sister and her husband and took off to Jacksonville, Florida, which, by the way, he didn't know anyone in Jacksonville.
He saw it in a magazine.
Perhaps. He liked them pictures. They were party. Soon after arriving, he was informed of a ship that offered food and shelter to those in need. And with not much more than the stolen car and clothes on his back, Henry was definitely in need of something. While waiting in line for food, Henry started chatting with another soup kitchen attendee, a man named Ottis Toole. He's our second murderer we'll be discussing. So we're going to pause on Henry, and we're going to discuss our bonus criminal, Ottis Toole's childhood and his adolescence up until he meets Henry. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So the story on Ottis is often overlooked since he didn't kill as many people as Henry. But Ottis is a cannibal, he is a killer, and he's confirmed to have killed at least 6 people while claiming to have killed many more. Ottis Elwood Toole was born March 5th, 1947. Ottis had 7 siblings. He had abusive parents and was raised in Jacksonville, Florida. Ottis's father was an alcoholic who sexually abused him before he eventually abandoned the family.
When did he leave? Oh, his dad abandoned the family, or he abandoned the family?
The dad abandoned the family.
How old was he when Dad left?
I'm not sure. I believe he was still in the single digits age. His dad stuck around long enough to screw this guy up. So as a young child, he really did, because as a young child, he was a victim of sexual abuse and incest made by many close relatives and acquaintances, including his sister and the next door neighbor.
Molested him, or the dad did?
No, they did.
They molested him?
Yes, they molested Ottis,
the hell?
His sister and the neighbor. In a documentary called Death Diploma, Ottis says that he was forced to have sex with his father's friends when he was only 5 years old. Yep. And Ottis said that he knew he was gay when he was 10 years old. I know that we're in a point in time where sexuality and all that stuff is more acceptable. But at 10, I feel like that's so young. My mind is blown, because at 10, I wasn't thinking about who I was attracted to. I was worried about not falling off my bike and not having our brother pop the heads off my Barbie.
You also weren't being raped by your neighbors and relatives. So I would say it wasn't occurring to you because it wasn't part of your life.
Yeah, that's true. By 12, he said he had a sexual relationship with a neighborhood boy. Ottis's mother and grandmother were religious extremists who also abused him. His grandmother allegedly was a Satanist who exposed herself. I'm sorry.
Exposed herself? Getting ahead of the story. painting it a different color there, eh?
I didn't mean to say exposed herself. I meant his grandmother allegedly was a Satanist who exposed him to self-mutilation, grave robbing, and then she would make magical charms out of stolen body parts.
What?
Yep. And his grandmother would refer to Otis as the devil's child.
Okay.
Uh-huh. And Otis's mother would dress him in girls' clothes, just like Henry's mother. And she would call him,
They have something to bond over now.
and she would call Otis Susan.
What
I
is with
figure
these
she,
ladies?
I don't know. I figure she was most likely mocking him for being gay. Like,
Oh.
yeah, cruel. Otis's IQ was said to be around 75. So he's classified as having mild mental retardation. And he also had epilepsy. So they have very similar background. But Otis would suffer grand mal seizures quite regularly. However, later officials would speculate that Otis's IQ was probably much higher and he just suffered from ADHD and dyslexia. Throughout his childhood, he would frequently run away from home and sleep in abandoned houses, which I don't blame this kid because if he's being sexually and physically abused at home, sleeping in an abandoned house has got to feel like a safe space.
Yeah.
In ninth grade, he dropped out of school and frequented gay bars. Otis also claimed that he'd been a male prostitute as a teenager and that he'd become obsessed with gay pornography around that same time. Otis claimed he committed his first murder when he was only 14. He said he ran a local salesman over who had propositioned him for sex. I don't understand if you're whoring yourself around. What did this guy do? Like, what pickup line did this salesman use that was so offensive that Otis decided to run him over with his own car?
Yeah.
But Otis was also a serial arsonist. Oh, I forgot that in my trigger warnings. Arson.
I feel like it's the lesser of the things.
I sure do too. But he was a serial arsonist from a young age and was sexually aroused by setting fires. Whenever the opportunity presented itself, Otis would set stuff on fire. He would burn down vacant houses in the neighborhood because oh, I forgot this quote for you, so I'll do my best for you, Claire. But he hated to see them just standing there. So he just set them on fire. So while Henry was off having sex with whatever mammal he could capture, Otis was off jerking off to the fires he'd set.
Cool.
Otis was first arrested at age 17 in August of 1965 for loitering. Honestly, I didn't know that people got arrested for loitering. I thought they were just told, like, get out of here. You know what I mean? I didn't realize you could actually be arrested for loitering.
I feel like you get a warning, and then if you keep coming back, you're going to get arrested.
Makes sense. A lot of information about Otis between the years of 1966 and 1973 are unknown or unclear because police believe that he more or less began drifting around the southern United States and he supported himself through prostitution and panhandling. So there is a gap of information there. At some point, he moved to Nebraska. Otis was the prime suspect in a 1974 murder of 24-year-old Patricia Webb. Patricia had recently started working at an adult bookstore and movie store. At the time of her disappearance, someone had robbed the store of 51 adult magazines, a calculator, and some petty cash.
Whoa. They sell a calculator?
They stole a calculator.
Yeah, but the store sells it? That seems like a weird...
I'm guessing it was probably up by the register.
That was an interesting robbery. Give me one of them theirs. That right? Calculator.
The burglar had also unlocked the shop door and cut the phone cord that led to the payphone.
So they couldn't call.
Yeah. A cattle farmer discovered Patricia's body 2 days later. It was filled with bullet holes and covered with a quilted jacket, and the rest of her clothes were missing. And she had a piece of duct tape over her mouth. Without a lot of evidence, her murder remains unsolved to this day.
Wow.
So Otis got the hell out of Dodge and moved to Boulder, Colorado. A month after moving there, he became the prime suspect of a homicide there was a murder of 31-year-old Ellen Hallman, she was murdered on October 14th, 1974. Ellen's murderer kidnapped her from Pueblo, Colorado, and shot her 3 times, then dumped her body close to the Oklahoma border. According to investigators, Ottis was probably the one to shoot and kill her. Unfortunately, just like with Patricia Webb's case, police could not convict Ottis of the crime, and it is technically still unsolved today. Ottis then decided to get the heck out of Colorado and went back to Jacksonville, Florida. It was early 1975. He hitchhiked through the American South, and on January 14th, 1976, Ottis was just shy of turned 29 years old when he married a woman 25 years his senior. She was 54, and she left him 3 days after discovering that he was gay.
How did that discovery go down?
I'm
Walked
not sure.
in at the neighbor boy.
Or they got married and she really wanted to have sex, and he's just like,
Here, put this candlestick in my butt.
Or he only wanted to put it in her butt, and she was like, I don't want it there. And he's like, but that's the only place I want to put it.
Give me the dog.
No, that's Henry. Ottis, don't do the animals.
Sorry.
After he's eventually captured, spoiler alert, he told in an interview that his marriage was a tactic meant to conceal his true sexuality. Turns out it only worked for 3 days. It was to hide the fact that he was gay.
To get married?
To a woman.
Yes. Well, thank you, Andrea.
You're welcome. In 1976, that's when Ottis was standing in the soup kitchen line in Jacksonville, Florida, and he met Henry Lee. And we're going to leave it right there for the day. You're going to have to tune in and see what this dynamic duo does next.
That was a lot of information. That was a lot. Thank you for listening to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Claire.
I'm Andy.
Follow us each week to get your fix of the atrocities that occur in true crime. And don't forget to tell people about us and rate us if you like us. But don't rate us if you didn't. Just change the channel.